The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, as a Ukrainian Canadian, on her first day in Parliament, it's both an honour and a tragedy for me to be speaking to you all about the tragic and brutal events in Ukraine. My mother was born in a refugee camp, and her parents, together with her and her three sisters, were grateful and delighted to find refuge here in Canada, like so many other Ukrainian Canadians. That left such an imprint of gratitude and delight in Canada and all it offered that my grandfather would not permit at his table any criticism of any Canadian government, no matter which party was in power. I'm afraid that in my new career, I'm not going to be able to follow perfectly that grandparental instruction.
That's okay. That's okay. Not perfectly.
Not perfectly. What I would like to talk about is what's happening in Ukraine and why the stakes are so high for Ukrainians, for Canadians, and for the world. As my colleague has just been describing, the struggle right now in Ukraine began over a European Association Agreement. Who knew that ordinary people could be so moved by trade treaties? But what it has become is a fight about democracy or dictatorship. The fact that that is what is at stake in Ukraine became very clear last week when President Yanukovych tried illegitimately to ram through Parliament a series of laws which would have severely restricted the rights of association, the rights of freedom of speech, the rights of assembly, and indeed the rights of religious organizations, including the Ukrainian Catholic Church. Ukrainians understand that this is a fight about the democracy that they have been working very hard and with a lot of setbacks over the past 20 years to build. We should be inspired. I'm inspired by what is happening right now in Ukraine. All of us as elected officials know about the cynicism which we sometimes encounter from voters. Imagine being Ukrainian. Imagine having gone through the Orange Revolution. That's not so long ago, 2004, 2005. And Ukrainians thought they had won. They thought they had really built democracy. It went so badly, ultimately, that they elected Yanukovych. And still today, they have the faith in democracy. They have the faith in the action of people and their ability to make change, that they are out there in the streets risking their lives. What happens in Ukraine matters to the world, and particularly, as my honorable colleague has been describing, in the neighborhood where Ukraine finds itself, in the former Soviet Union, in the former Warsaw Pact. These are parts of the world where the hold of democracy is tenuous. History didn't end in 1991, despite Francis Fukuyama's prediction that it would. And right now, everyone in that part of the world is watching Ukraine very closely to see what the outcome will be, and to see also if people like us, democratically elected officials in democracies, will not only talk the talk, but walk the walk, whether we really believe in democracy enough to support it when it is at risk. This is also a tremendously important opportunity for Canada to be heard in the world. As we've heard so eloquently this evening, many of us represent communities with strong Ukrainian-Canadian representation. Ukrainians are an important people, an important community in Canada, and Canada has an important voice in Ukraine. That was made manifest most powerfully, actually, by a conservative government in 1991, when Canada and Poland were the first two countries to recognize Ukrainian independence. Ukraine listens to us, and the world listens to what we do and what we say about Ukraine. This is an opportunity, as my honorable colleague has suggested, for us to do what Lester B. Pearson taught us, which is to punch above our weight in international affairs by taking the lead on Ukraine. And it is really clear what we can do. it's wonderful for me as a Ukrainian Canadian to hear so much anguish, to hear so much worry, to hear so much sympathy for the people of Ukraine. But now is the time to act. And there are three very clear things for us to do. The first is targeted sanctions against President Yanukovych and his allies in government. That will have an impact. One of the jokes that people tell in the former Soviet Union now is that their dictators want to rule like Stalin, but live like Abramovich. That's what globalization allows nowadays. You can be a dictator at home, but have a villa on Cap Ferrat. We can't allow that to happen, and we have to say you can't have it both ways. The second thing that we have to do is expedited visas for the people who have put their lives at risk on the Euromaidan. Again, this is a very important symbolic statement that we are with them. Thirdly, we have to send high-level observers. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and if we are there watching, I can assure you the brutality will be less. I hope you'll permit me, since this is my first statement here and we're talking about Ukraine, to share with you one of the slogans of the Euromaidan. Razom nas bahato, nas ne podolate. The people united cannot be defeated. That is true today in Ukraine, and if we unite with them, if we actually act, and let me say, as a Ukrainian Canadian, as a proud member of Canada's Parliament, the words of support are terrific, but now let's do something. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very honored to ask my first question in this debate to Honourable Member. That's on her first day in Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, I listened very carefully to her speech and other speeches here in the House. And we talk about sanctions. And I mentioned on occasions in Parliament, I was born and raised in Poland. I have my past in the solidarity movement that eventually brought freedom and collapse of communism. And I remember the sanctions of 1981 after the introduction of martial law in Poland. There was sanctions from different countries in the world, including United States of America, some European countries. And I remember the government spokesman speaking after that, because some of the sanctions limited food supplies coming to Poland. And he said, well, there will be enough food for the government. Therefore, my question to the Honourable Member is, how should different governments act in imposing sanctions that they don't affect people of Ukraine, but they affect the oligarchs and the government?
The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much for the question, which reflects a deep lived experience of events similar to those in Ukraine. And if I may, I would like to answer as I did to my 9-year-old daughter yesterday. We were at a rally for the Euromaidan in Toronto, and she was with me, and we came home, and she said, Mama, you're talking about sanctions, but it's going to hurt the people of Ukraine. Isn't that a bad idea? And what I said to her is these must be directly targeted personal sanctions. In particular, I think we need to target visa travel. I think we need to find and freeze the assets in the West. And, you know, we have to say you can't have it both ways. You can't be a dictator at home and travel abroad and have fine real estate. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for BC Southern Interior.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to first of all congratulate my colleague on her recent election and thank her for her speech. One thing when I've been thinking about this whole debate and the tragedy that's happening, I say that Ukraine is there under the shadow of a very powerful Russia, which is attempting to dictate policy. We have although not analogous, but a similar situation. We live under the shadow of the United States, and we've been able to navigate this big brother somehow and chart our own independence. What can we, in an analogous situation to Ukraine, offer our our brothers and sisters in Ukraine to somehow live with the shadow of Russia, but yet to maintain that independent path?
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Well, thank you for that excellent question, and that similarity in position may well be why Ukrainians find themselves so much at home in Canada. There is a saying about Ukrainian politicians in Ukraine that they don't need umbrellas because they need to know how to walk between the raindrops as they navigate their way between Russia and the West. I think that is what President Yanukovych was caught in this dilemma, and he did indeed face tremendous pressure in the decision that he made in the fall. Right now, though, I don't think it's a question about fine subtlety. I think that President Yanukovych has attempted to very severely restrict the democratic freedoms that Ukrainians have enjoyed for 20 years. And at this point, his big decision is what should he do with his people in Ukraine. There, I hope that these Canadian observers we've been talking about could play an essential role, and there is a need right now for mediators between the opposition and the government. Canadians could be very, very trusted interlocutors, and I hope we'll send a high-level delegation there soon.
Resuming debate.